So there are a few reasons why I think financial literacy is really critical for service managers. The obvious one is that for a service manager who's not financially literate versus is, it's going to separate an average service manager from a performance and engagement and success standpoint from an exceptional one. Most people that go into that line of work aspire to be a fixed ops director or a general manager someday, and having that financial literacy is absolutely required to be on that type of career path. But beyond that, it's very common in a car dealership for fixed operations to really get loaded up with a good portion of the expense of the store. A lot of that expense belongs there because the largest amount of headcount are in the fixed operations departments, but there are other expenses that could legitimately go somewhere else, and for whatever reason they're chosen to be put into fixed just because it's a profit center and that expense has to go somewhere. So having financial literacy to identify those expenses and smartly manage them is going to result in a better net profit. But the other thing that I tell you is that service managers and parts managers and fixed ops directors have a very, very unique and fortunate opportunity. And that's that if you look at someone who's trying to grow into being a general manager and you look at two different career paths, one going up through fixed and one going up through variable. When you have someone going up through variable, they sell cars. What are they responsible for? Selling cars. They maybe go into finance. What are they responsible for? Generating gross profit, selling products. And then they go to the sales desk. What are they responsible for? Volume and gross. And then from there, someone could become a general manager. But up until that point, very rarely does anybody who comes up through variable have experience managing expenses. Now you look at someone coming up through fixed operations. Let's say someone was a technician or a service advisor and they get promoted to be a service manager. Well, right there in that first entry-level management role, there's a heavy amount of focus on managing expenses. So, and you go from there to managing a bigger store to being a fixed ops director. By the time someone becomes a general manager that's come up through fixed operations, they have years of experience managing expenses and understanding those industry benchmarks, whereas there's not nearly that focus on it coming up through variable. So for someone who's focused on being a general manager as the end goal to their career path, having that exposure to being financially savvy and being good at managing your expenses, I think better prepares somebody to be a successful general manager. There's 30 some odd lines to the financial statement, but I think that the most important ones to keep an eye on and get familiar with when you're new to it are gross profit percentage by pay type. And depending on who you talk to, there will be different opinions on what an acceptable gross profit percentage is, but I'm going to use some NADA standards. They're typically looking for a gross profit percentage for labor of 76-ish% across the board. Let's call it 76% on customer pay, 78 to 80% on labor, and 76% on internal. So those are your three pay types. Similarly, gross profit percentage for the parts department. So typically you're looking for a 35 to 40% margin for customer pay, 30% margin for warranty, 35% for internal. So looking at that gross profit percentage to make sure that you're charging an appropriate amount for your good or your labor hour, and you're managing your cost of goods sold effectively. Beyond that, I would live and die by the net to gross ratio. And for someone who's new to a financial statement, that's simply the ratio of your net profit divided into your gross profit. Whatever that percentage is a very important KPI. So just for easy math, if you did $100,000 in gross and $25,000 in net, your net to gross ratio was 25%. 25% is an industry standard for being a healthy service department. The last thing I would keep an eye on if I'm just looking for easy wins, big rocks to look at, would be month-to-month fluctuations in variable expense. So on your P&L, you've got variable expense, you've got fixed expense, and then you've got semi-fixed expense. Your variable expense is where your non-technician people wages are going to go. All of your hourly people, all the commissions paid out to your service advisors. It's just what the name insinuates. That expense is going to vary the most. So keeping an eye on it to make sure there aren't any large fluctuations on a month-to-month basis would be an important thing for someone to look at if they're just starting to get familiar managing a P&L. So a variable expense would be overtime. It would be healthcare benefits. It would be commissions paid out to your service advisors. Fixed expense is your rent. That would be an example of your fixed expense. It's going to be the same every single month. So the revenue streams are going to most commonly break down with large fluctuations in RO count traffic. So let's say something breaks in the service scheduler and the service manager isn't in the habit of checking it regularly. So as a result, fewer appointments are coming in on a daily basis. That does happen, and many service managers aren't paying attention to how their schedule is functioning on a daily basis. That's not as common. What would be more common is losing sight of your receivables, because what most service managers pay attention to are, okay, what's my appointment count for today? How many ROs did I close? What sort of gross did I make? But customer pay is the only pay type where you get paid for that work right away because a customer gave you cash, gave you a check, gave you a credit card. With internal, it goes onto a schedule that ultimately gets fulfilled internally. With warranty, it goes onto a schedule, and your warranty administrator is responsible for getting your store reimbursed from your manufacturer for that closed repair order. Most service managers lose sight of that repair order the moment it's closed because in their mind, I got paid. Well, with warranty, that's not the case. And the goal is to get paid on those warranty receivables in 30 days or less. If your warranty clerk is new, struggling, you had turnover, you could start seeing that receivable be 45, 60, 90 days out, and that creates a major cash flow problem for your service department and your dealership. Not just managing your P&L, but keeping an eye on your receivables, your schedules, which are usually warranty, extended warranty, and for your parts department, your wholesale accounts, making sure you're getting paid after that invoice has been closed. Typically losing sight of that is where a service or parts department would most often break down, especially with a new manager in the department. When we're talking about this really very simple equation, the revenue for which you sell your part or the revenue for which you sell your labor hour less the cost of that product, so that would be the cost of the part or the cost of that hour worth of technician time, revenue less the COGS is your gross profit. And the ratio between the two is your gross profit percentage. So the best advice I can give you, especially if it's someone who's just getting new to managing that portion of your business, is to understand that every single thing that you sell has a cost, and it's important that we avoid overpaying for that product, whether it's overpaying for a technician based on their skill level or overpaying for that part depending on where we're sourcing it. But it's equally important to make sure that we're charging a fair market value for it. With parts, that's relatively easy to automate. You can use your DMS system to pre-populate a particular margin that you want to charge for it, and to let you know if that gets out of whack. But with labor, it requires quite a bit more strategy, because you need to evaluate the skill level of each technician and do your very best with your workflow, whether that's a central dispatcher or a computer dispatch system, to make sure that the work that's getting dispatched to that technician befits their skill set. And that's not only going to help them be successful in repairing the car, but it's also going to help you financially smartly manage your business by not giving a $40 an hour journeyman technician a oil and filter change that came in on a coupon for $49.95. And similarly, giving a brand new technician who's making, minimum shop wage based on your state labor standards, a diagnostic job that's over his head. Obviously, the issue for the customer there is that the proper job might not get done on the car, but in one instance, you're overpaying for the type of work that needs to be done, and you're going to erode your gross profit percentage by not matching the skill level of the work with the skill level of the technician. So that's the best example I can give you for understanding cost of goods sold, particularly on the labor side. Smartly managing your work distribution is the name of the game there. So non-negotiables for a service manager to track would be gross profit by pay type. We talked about that a moment ago. Net to gross. We talked about that a moment ago. Variable and semi-fixed expenses. Ideally, I'd like it if the service manager would look at each expense line and understand if it's going up or down, but if they either don't have the time for that or don't have the prowess for that, looking at your total variable expense as a ratio to your gross. There are standards for that, and you can find those standards either by looking it up through the NADA, or your manufacturer is going to have standards for that when they give you composite reports comparing you to a peer group. of other similarly sized, similarly market, same make dealers, and keeping an eye on your variable expense as a ratio to your gross and holding yourself accountable for that benchmark. Similarly, semi-fixed expense, there's going to be a benchmark for that as a ratio to your gross. Making sure that you're in line with your benchmark is a good temperature to take on a monthly basis. And if you don't have the time to dig into it, but you're at or better than the benchmark, you're probably okay. If you miss the benchmark, you better open the hood and do some diagnostics on why. Lastly, I think a non-negotiable for service managers is keeping a very close eye on your labor dollars per repair order. I know lots of service managers that live and die by effective labor rate, lots of other service managers who live and die by hours per repair order. Labor dollars per repair order is the combination of the two. So if you keep an eye on that one benchmark and it ever falls out of line, again, you can do some triage to find out, are you losing it on the hours sold side or on the effective labor rate side? Those would be the KPIs I keep an eye on: gross profit by pay type, net to gross ratio, benchmarks for expense as a ratio of gross, and then my labor dollars sold per repair order. So there's a lot of debate and confusion between absorption and fixed coverage. What we're looking for with that metric is to make sure that the gross profit that's being generated in fixed, service gross plus parts gross plus collision gross if you have a collision center, that amount of gross needs to cover 100% of the total expense for the dealership. So if you have $1 million in fixed operations gross, and the entire expense for the dealership to run it and open the doors and pay everybody is $1 million, then that would be considered 100% fixed coverage. And the goal there is to try and make sure that all of the variable gross that's coming through your new car department, your used car department, and finance department, if you have 100% fixed coverage, then all of that gross falls to net profit. All of that gross falls to the bottom line. And that ratio, if you can get it to 100% or close to it or over, that ratio is directly proportional to the overall financial state of health of the dealership. So daily operational habits to directly impact financial performance is almost always going to come down to people and process. Making sure you have the right people in the right seats, doing the right things, following the right process. Only when you have people in process can the store be in a healthy way prepared for growth. Also, having daily habits where you're watching how your work is being dispatched. We talked about this a moment ago, to make sure that the right job is getting to the right technician. That's going to produce the best result for your customer and also both maximize your gross profit percentage as well as your hours sold. Give you a specific example of that. So at one point in the past, I was managing a service department and we had an incredible technician that was just for some reason abnormally efficient in replacing transmissions. And although his skill set made him prepared to do so many other great things that would have offered a wonderful value to our customers, he could replace 4 transmissions a day. And at that point in that manufacturer's history, we needed to replace 4 transmissions a day. Although there were lots of other types of work that he could have made good profit for the dealership on, because he was so efficient with that particular task, all we did was line him up with transmissions all day long. So managing your workflow to make sure not only the right job is going to the right technician from a skill set standpoint, but also if there's something that a technician is particularly proficient at, just line that up for him. That's going to maximize not only your gross profit percentage, but the amount of hours that your shop is able to produce. Scheduling plays a huge role. Obviously, the guest needs a good experience. How you schedule your work is going to result in the guest getting greeted promptly or not, getting the car into the shop promptly or not, getting the car back to the guest promptly or not. So if the scheduling is not set up smartly, either the guest isn't getting greeted properly, getting served properly, or being turned around properly, and without all 3 of those being a yes, guest is probably not going to come back, which is obviously detrimental to the overall health of the store and its ability to grow. So scheduling and workflow are key to delivering a guest experience, but also, like we've talked about, having the work mix coming into the store that's in proportion to the tech mix that you have in your shop is key. So if 60% of your shop is really only trained for light duty maintenance, but you're bringing in 60% of your work that's heavy duty diesel repair, that's going to create a log jam in your service department. So making sure that the scheduling and workflow is set up to bring in the type of work that the shop is scaled for from a skill set standpoint is going to be important, not just for the guest experience, but for the store's overall health, workflow, and profitability. So the doc is like a computerized financial statement that gives you a real-time pulse on where you are month to date at that point in your month. So it'll show you what sales you've had so far for the month, what gross you've had so far for the month, what expenses have been invoiced and paid for that point in the month. And I really just use the doc to understand where I'm trending for that month, because if you don't, then you're just going to use the financial statement, and the financial statement is a lag indicator, right? Like by the time you get the financial statement, that month is gone. You can't get that time back. You didn't have an opportunity to make a pivot if you needed to make a pivot mid-month if all you're leaning on is the financial statement. So the doc is your live financial statement for where you are that month, so you can understand how you're trending and if you're on pace for your goals. So when they're looking at their month-end financial reports, analyzing their performance versus their forecast is the name of the game. What was my goal? Where did I come in at? If I overachieve my goal, do a little bit of diagnostic to find out why, and find out if that why is replicatable, and if so, that's how we grow. Those are best practices. Share them with your peers and learn from them. Similarly, if you missed your goal, do some diagnostics to find out why, and then take those lessons learned into the next month and into your forecast for the next year so that you can more accurately forecast your financial performance. Basic forecasting is really like fourth grade math. It's not that difficult, especially, for service, because you're just going to take, let's just say I'm going to forecast a given month. You're just going to take the number of days, the number of working days you have in that month, multiply by the number of available hours based on your operating hours, multiply by the number of technicians you anticipate having on staff, multiplied by your average shop efficiency, multiplied by your effective labor rate, multiplied by your shop utilization, and that's going to give you your sales. So I know I said multiply a bunch of times, but it's really fourth grade math. Where it gets a little bit more sophisticated is when you use historical financial data sets to set smarter goals. So what you would do is you would look back on previous years and identify, how did my traffic fluctuate? How did my sales on additional service requests fluctuate based on seasonality in my market, based on external factors like holidays, election years, things like that, so that you can not just assume that every month is created equal, because a winter in Salt Lake City might fluctuate differently than a winter in San Diego. So looking back at your business historical data will help you better anticipate how to forecast during those seasonal fluctuations and external factors that might impact your business. The most common mistake I see people make when managing a business and reacting to financial performance is overreacting and not investing the time to understand cause and effect relationships. Let me give you a real world example. In many car dealerships across the country, a department's going to miss their net profit goal. And let's say they miss their net profit goal by $10,000, there's a decent likelihood that general manager is going to challenge that service manager and say, hey, Nick, you missed your net profit goal by $10,000. So you need to cut $10,000 from your expense budget today, or else the same thing's going to happen. Understanding why we missed that goal by $10,000 is critical, because if we don't, we're just going to go cut for the sake of cutting. If there's fat in the department, we might go cut muscle if we don't understand that cause and effect relationship. So overreacting and abandoning your plan that you had to be successful that year just because you didn't make your goal for that particular month, abandoning the plan without truly understanding the cause and effect relationship of why you missed your goal is probably the most common mistake I would say that I see get made. 1 month isn't a trend. It's a singular data point. So I would consider 90 days to be a trend at that point, but that doesn't mean that we should wait 90 days to start investigating the cause and effect relationship of missing a goal. It looks like true ownership when the understanding of the financials translates into human engagement. So by that I mean, the service manager understands the financials, understands that if I push this button and pull this lever, it creates a financial output here. And then with that data, they start looking at the individual performance of each person in their service department, and they start having weekly one-on-ones or monthly one-on-ones with their employees to review the 2 or 3 KPIs that they can most directly impact, that have a financial impact for the department, and making sure that those conversations are taking place in a very disciplined fashion and that accountability is a part of the culture of the department. Also, making sure that expenses are in line with the benchmarks that are set by either NADA or your manufacturer, and keeping an eye on those on a monthly basis, I think is also what it looks like when true ownership is taken. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and behind, and the best advice I can give you is make this something that you look at every day. Don't make it something you get to, make it the first thing that you do every day. And the longer it takes you to get to it, the more likely you're going to miss your goals, and the longer it's going to take you to catch up and get your bearings. So I'd recommend having the very first 30 minutes of your day be spent on your financial analytics. Am I on pace for my particular month? What one-on-ones am I having today with my employees that I need to prepare for? Do it first thing in the morning. Truly understand your pace, but also leverage technology that's available to you. There are so many companies out there that sell software that analyze your doc in real time and give you these analytics and literally give you what I would call a Visine report. By Visine report, it's intended to get the red out. Basically, it gives you like a multi-point inspection of your dealership. These KPIs are green, these KPIs are yellow, these KPIs are red, and you can literally just go click on the red KPIs and it'll drill down for you and help you identify and diagnose what's going on in that particular line item. Executive Eye is an example of a technology like that. So leaning into that technology can help you be a lot more efficient. The last piece of advice that I'd give you, especially if you're a new manager that feels overwhelmed, get a mentor. Because the reality is that you don't know what you don't know. Every human being in the history of ever didn't know what they didn't know. So having a mentor that's further on in the development of their career, bringing you along, is one of the best resources that you can invest in. If you're a new service manager or a new parts manager and you're just looking to get started, make the investment in a book that was written in the 70s, I think it was the 70s, called The 7 Controllables. It's a really expensive book, but it's expensive for a reason. Read it. It was true then, it's true today. It's going to give you the basic bearings that you need, and then don't wait to implement those disciplines that you learn in that book. If you're further on in your career, you understand the 7 controllables, and you're looking to go from good to great in your financial understanding, I would strongly recommend that you invest in coursework that's put on by NADA. Now, NADA has general managers universities, and that's a 18-month commitment and many tens of thousands of dollars. But for service and parts managers, they have 2- and 3-day courses just on understanding the financial statement for those departments. I've personally been through it. It's one of the best experiences I've ever had. That can take your financial understanding from good to great for a minimal investment of time and money. So those would be my closing recommendations.